We are back in the black hole of real estate, and I'm getting so many people that are thinking about doing something a little bit different this year, and it's flipping a house. And I got some ideas on that, not necessarily advice, but thoughts. This is your host, Ron Wysakarski, for the black hole of real estate, and I find it interesting that a number of real estate agents are struggling this year, while others are absolutely killing it. Some are having their best years, and I can say, for myself, it's been an amazing year, a really good year. But there's a lot of ones that are not as successful as they would have liked to have been or planned to have been. And oddly enough, I've got some talking about flipping houses. And I also have some investors that are looking to maybe flip some homes or add some homes to their rental property portfolio. And then, of course, there's the flippers and the wholesalers that are constantly sending over lowball offers. I'll just put it at that. And, when you've got a $400,000 listing and they're getting upset because your seller won't sign a $150,000 offer, that kind of stuff. So if you're going to flip a house, if I was going to flip one, I'd have a lot of things that I would be lining up. The first thing would be location. I would want a home, ideally, that would be in a location that people would want to be in. And it doesn't mean it has to be a multi-million-dollar neighborhood. There are a lot of desirable locations that on the surface might not necessarily be ideal. You see, an ideal location might be in a price point that is somewhere below the median sales price. Makes it more affordable to a wider audience. And that could be good for someone who wants to invest in a turnkey property to then rent out for cash flow. It could be for a first-time home buyer. It could also be for somebody downsizing. So there's a number of places that fit that bill. So I would look, at the location, and I would understand, what my budget would get me and where that money would be best spent. Now, I would also look at, how can I market that property after closing? Because we have to start with the end in mind. So is it a great neighborhood? Does it or does it not back up to railroad tracks or high tension lines or airports or busy streets where there's a lot of ground noise? Is the rest of the neighborhood having homes that are nicer and well maintained? Or will mine be the oasis in a dust bowl? And both are okay. I just want to understand that when I complete the job, what is my marketing strategy? Because I should be designing the renovation around how I'm going to market to sell it for the most amount of money. Now, condition. Am I going to want to purchase one where, it's the proverbial lipstick on a pig? We're just going to paint it, change out some floors, and throw it back on the market? And for some people, that works. It might be a lower margin of return, but it could go back in the market super fast. And if you're going to go to big projects like moving walls or purchasing cabinets and windows and adding on a roof, that may very well delay you getting back on the market. And the time cost of money is such that every day you're paying for your carrying costs, whatever they are. If you got a hard money loan or you took money out of a fund that was making you 10%, that costs you money. Are you purchasing insurance or are you self-insuring? Are there homeowners association fees? You've got taxes to take into consideration. For the minute you purchase that property, the clock is ticking and the money is increasing. Same with appliances or anything else that you are going to purchase. If there's interest involved, if you're putting it on a credit card, hopefully you're doing it all with cash, but sometimes when you start out with this, you get the money where you can. You pay a little bit more, let's just call it tuition. You're going to flip a house, you'll make a little bit less because you don't have all the cash or don't want to use all of the cash on just that one property. So if we can salt away location and condition in the marketing piece, then it's just really understanding the market and where it might go. And if you're purchasing at 150 and you're putting in 50, you got 200 in. And if you sold it at 250 and you were paying, commissions and closing fees, you might have to budget another 20 grand. So you might even be in the neighborhood of 220, 215, 225, somewhere in there, all in on your renovation and all your fees and costs. And if that's the case, if you sold it at 250, if that was possible, there'd be a $30,000 profit. Now keep in mind, you're going to pay tax on that profit. So let's just call it $30,000 profit for the moment. If you're in the 15% tax bracket, which you probably aren't, but it'd be about $4,000 or $5,000 in taxes. If you're in the 25, let's say, well, now $7,500 is going out the window, so there's still $20,000 left over, maybe 22. Not a bad take, as long as it didn't take a long time. So there's ways to make money. Now the problem is you're planning to sell it for $250, but what happens? What happens if it's held for $225? You are barely breaking even. And for those that are getting into the flipping game, whether it's the first one or their 100th flip, I can make a case that making $5,000 might be a return that would be acceptable, especially if we're facing a potential loss where you might lose $10,000. But do you want to risk $200,000 to make $5,000? And for some people, the answer is yes, and that's fine. But it's about a 2.5% return cash on cash for that transaction. Maybe not as much as you're making in your investment account or your stocks and your bonds, or maybe you could put it somewhere else to make a similar return or a better return. And by no means am I saying, oh my God, there's only $5,000 being made, you better bail out. I think we should have our eyes open. Because as we're doing this, we're always anticipating that we're going to make the home more valuable, and with that, make some profits. And it's a fair assessment until a market condition causes competition where prices are not being fetched that will be favorable to a seller. And I can only imagine what it would be like for the first flip where you've got 220 into it and you think you're going to get 250. And 6 months later, the best offer you got is 210, and you're staring down the barrel of losing $10,000. Oddly enough, you're probably going to be able to write off the loss and save some of that in your taxes. I don't know about half of it, but some of it. So there may be an exit strategy where you get a little bit of a tax credit, but that's not flipping for profit. Now, what could also happen is you could choose to just rent the house out if you cannot get the return for whatever reason. If you were in for $220,000 and your math said that I need about $2,000 a month to justify this expenditure to pay off my debt and my bills, well, maybe that's a good return. Maybe it's a 10% cash on cash return that even though you set up to flip the property, it might make complete sense to go ahead and rent it out for a year until market conditions are better. Maybe the interest rates are lower, prices have risen higher, something could have happened. Maybe they put up a big, Amazon building or something next to, nearby where it can provide some jobs for the area. A lot could change over the course of a year. So I would surmise that sometimes the least worst option is a viable option and a good one. And I'm not convinced that I would take a loss on a property I was trying to flip unless I had to unlock the money for a deal that was a sure thing or better than this one. And if we felt that there was continued declination in that property, and if you're losing $5,000 right now, a year from now, if it slides in the wrong direction and it's 15 or 20 to the negative, that's something I'd watch out for. And unless you can see around corners and have a magical crystal ball, it may not be perfectly easy for you to do that. And with the number of people out there wholesaling and flipping right now that have a lot of tools and a lot of experience, they're still struggling too. So my suspicion is with a lot of due diligence, you could beat the odds and not get burned on the flip. But I would have my eyes wide open to the market that I'm entering into, because it's taking longer for properties to sell. And homes that go on the market overpriced tend to sit and linger and not sell. And it takes away the options of an owner. I would always want the option of, Here's someone making an offer that might be acceptable, but I have this other vehicle that I can make money every month and then sell at a future date where there might be a better return on my investment. So that's what I would do if I was looking at flipping a home today. This is your host, Ron Wojciechowski, for the Black Hole of Real Estate.